Well, I was very interested in the research presentation and was hoping you all would ask some questions about it. I did very much agree with the presenter that those kinds of presentations or those kinds of research efforts generally need to go further and you need to keep asking questions. I kept waiting to see the breakdown between the profits and for-profits and the nonprofits, right? That would have been the next good thing to do. Well, I appreciate very much being invited to speak to you all today. I have to tell you that I have had a day absolutely jam-packed with events, and my head is kind of swirling with lots of things that I've heard today, some of which I want to share with you that weren't in my prepared remarks, and I've hardly had a chance to even note things down. I went down this morning to Quantico to the Marine Corps University, which was an absolutely fascinating visit. I heard from the different people there, and I want to tell you, as far as I'm concerned, the Marine Corps University could be a model for the rest of the country in terms of what they're doing down there. I was extremely impressed. I think probably most Americans have no idea what's going on in our military sector in terms of the wonderful education programs that are going on. I got their reading list, which is pretty impressive, and they're doing programs at all levels, including all their top leadership continue to go through educational programs, including the generals. Again, it was really a fascinating time. One of the quotes that we got from that meeting, and Leslie Goodman, who's here with me, was helping me remember it a minute ago. It's a very simple comment, but I brought up the issue of training versus education, which I do. If you've been in a group with me before, you've heard me say it, and I apologize to you for it. But they break their programs out in educational programs and training programs. And I asked the general, the president of the university, I said, have you and I talked about this before? He said, no. He said, I've never heard you say anything about it, I don't think. But he was right on with it. They have an understanding, and the presentation here, again, made me think about it a little bit more. They understand there really are places where you need to train. If you're going to learn to shoot a gun, you got to learn how to take that gun apart, you got to learn how to shoot. That's training, as opposed to education. And the way they had one of their visionaries say it is training is preparation or is preparing for certainty. Education is preparing for uncertainty. I think all people in education should keep those two definitions in mind, because I think it's very important that we break those two apart. And when I catch people up all the time who are in the education business and talking about training, I tell them the only thing I remember from my doctoral program, which is probably a very negative comment about me, is one of my professors saying, you train animals and you educate people. So I'm very strong on using the term education when you're talking about people. I've also just come from a session with a group of women CEOs who came in to talk to all female members of Congress who were there, but there were male and female staffers there who were talking about some of the same issues that came up in the research that was being presented earlier about the need for people they brought up the issue that they're finding it difficult to find people with the skills set. That was the term used by the CEO of a high-tech company. CEO of a healthcare company said the same thing. CEO of an insurance company said the same thing. So people need different skill sets for those different occupations. But that was a big issue with them. Again, I don't think that you have to make a distinction between getting skills and getting an education. I think you do both. We all need skills. And I often come back to, when I speak to groups, particularly people who think of themselves as vocational schools, and I really hate that term too, is if you know anything about educational history in this country, you know that Harvard was begun as a vocational school, okay? Anybody can tell that story here? Why was Harvard College founded? Anybody know? To provide for clergymen in this country. The early people who came to this country became very concerned that we did not have any institutions in this country that were going to educate the clergy, and that we were going to become unchurched in this country. And so Harvard was founded as a vocational school, basically, and still is a vocational school as far as I'm concerned, because everybody that goes to college, in my opinion, whether you're at a for-profit, a not-for-profit, a private, a public, those people want to get a degree, hopefully, so they can get a job, right? So everybody's in the vocational school business. And so I think that folks need to promote those ideas when they talk about what we're doing in education. One of the topics I was asked to address was, what is our committee doing and what do we see as the future? And I'm going to quickly get into that issue and get away from the podium so you can get back to your schedule this afternoon, because I've got to go back to meet with those women CEOs again. I think that what we are seeing, I think that the results of the research indicate that too, is that we have come to a place in this country where people are wondering whether our institutions of higher education are providing our students with a product, meaning what are we giving them, not the students being the product, but what are we giving them to help them become effective citizens in our culture, and are we doing that as efficiently as possible? We want those students to have workplace success and satisfaction. Unfortunately, I think for the last, 40 or so years, maybe 50 years, our institutions of higher education in the not-for-profit world, I think, have lost sight of what their roles are there, and they have not been concerned about efficiency or effectiveness. Whereas I think those of you in the for-profit sector have really honed in on those issues and are doing the best that you know how to do to make sure that the students that you have come to your institutions come out with the skills that they need to have workforce success. And what we're seeing, I think, all throughout the federal government, which is way long overdue in my opinion, is an emphasis on accountability. Unfortunately, I think what is happening is there's very selective emphasis on accountability. And having been in education for a good part of my life, as well as now 16 years in the public policy arena, what I have seen happen is that generally the accountability gets demanded of the people who are the new kids on the block, so to speak. And the people who have been around for a long, long time sort of skate by on their reputations or on their histories, and there is not the demand for accountability from them that there is of the new kids on the block. One of the things that was emphasized this morning at the Marine Corps College was the emphasis on critical thinking skills. And again, if some of you have heard me talk before, and I suspect that you have, you know that I am very keen on this recent study called Academically Adrift, which focuses on the fact that almost none of the students graduating from four-year colleges, whether they're private or public, are gaining any kind of skills in critical thinking. And that is a real problem. And that, again, one of the slides that went up about people wanting folks with broad-based educations as opposed to a skill set, I go back to the comment that I made earlier. There's not a dichotomy there. You don't have to have either or. In fact, what our colleges and universities ought to be doing is both. But in order to meet the demands of students, in many cases, both the skill-based curriculum as well as the broad-based curriculum have been thrown out the door. And what you're seeing is that the colleges and universities are basically pandering to the students and giving them what they want as opposed to what employers want. And what I think the for-profit schools are doing is just the opposite. Now I think that what the challenge you have is to be able to get the research to show that you are meeting the needs of employers as opposed to what the private schools and the public schools are doing. I think what that means for us and what our committee has been focusing on, and if you're paying attention at all to it, not just my subcommittee, but the entire committee is focusing on how we can find programs that work and make them better. We've had lots of hearings, and we're doing our best to try to focus in on those. And again, at the elementary and secondary education level, we're looking at No Child Left Behind. We've done a lot in the revisions of that. The area we've left off has been accountability with the teachers. That hasn't been dealt with. One of the things that we've looked at in our subcommittee, which is so very important, which I actually got involved in when I was in the state Senate, was all the workforce training programs. And again, I hate that term, but that's the legislative term for it. So I think that what we have to do, and it's a very, very difficult task, is to find the programs that work, find the programs that don't work and eliminate them, or fix them. And that's part of our task. And what you all can do is to continue what's going on here, what was just being presented in terms of the research, to hone in on showing people what you're doing that works, and let us pursue going into the rest of higher education to investigate what's working and what's not working and highlight that. I think there's a blessing in a way to our terrible downturn in the economy. Anytime you have that happen, and I was in education in the state of North Carolina when we had a couple of these downturns, you begin to look critically at the programs that are out there. We have to do that at every level of our government, but particularly we have to do it at the federal government. And again, as those of you know who've been around me for a long time, I don't think the federal government has any business being involved in education whatsoever. But if we're going to be involved in education, we have to prove to the taxpayers that they're getting something for their money. You have to do that every day because of the business that you're in. But the not-for-profits and the public institutions have not found that kind of scrutiny in the past. It's high time that that scrutiny is applied to them and to every other federally funded program, as far as I'm concerned, not just in education, but throughout the federal government. So I want to commend you for taking the tack that you're going in. I want to commend you for taking the risks that you take to go out every day and offer programs that will help people be successful in their lives, and say to you, help us make sure that how we're spending the public's money is done better than it has been done in the past, and that we can learn from each other on ways that we can be more efficient and more effective. Thank you very much.